good parts business too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. Replacement stuff.
Wear items.
One of those heads go for about, anyway, we have what we call a TCI pack. We dole out money, we got about $400,000 budget.
Tom, can I say something before you?
Right after I reconvene?
Presentation chair.
I'd like to call back to order the 2020 March 12 meeting of the Planning Commissioners. Mr. Drummond has asked for the floor.
I received an email this morning at 9 o'clock, just as I was talking about House Bill 1390 from Kevin Canale, who is Associate Director at MACO. MACO is acronym for Maryland Association of Counties. He says, Chris, I'm very confident we've killed this bill in ECM, Economic Matters Committee. I do not expect the bill to move out of committee.
Good news.
Thank you for the update. All right, on to extension requests. We no longer need to review Perry's Retreat. So next up, Major Site Plan 05-10-02-0005, Kent Narrows Hospitality Inc., Holiday Inn Express. They're asking for an addition to their existing hotel of 25 rooms, and today they're before us seeking a request of an 8-month extension. DMS representing.
Thank you. Tom Davis with DMS. We've been working on this project for a number of years. The Planning Commission had granted several extensions, and we've been updating periodically over the last year and a half, 2 years on the status of it. We have submitted, and the county did issue the grading permit, and Jim DiDonato and the Kent Narrows Hospitality have secured their architectural plans, and they've been submitted to the county permit office for an initial code review. And the next step is to apply for the building permit as outlined in my letter, with the goal of having the building permit application filed here in the next month or two, permit issued during the summer, start of construction in the fall when they're busy times of the hotel, slack off. So the idea is that we asked for 8 months because of the timing from to date right now and getting that start of construction going on. So Jim can elaborate. He does have an updated elevation rendering of the building, and as I indicated, the architectural plans have been submitted to the county permit office for an initial code review. Once we get those code comments, then we'll finalize the building plans and submit for the building permit application. So. Jim,
Any questions that you have, I'd be glad to answer.
This project has been extended for 10 years now. And I've been here for several of those extensions, some of which were for economic reasons, some of which were for competitive projects that you were working on that made this a lesser priority. Lots of different reasons all the time. We're now dealing with a health crisis that may have an adverse impact on tourism, not only here but everywhere. And we're looking at another request for an 8-month extension. I mean, I'm wondering, on behalf of the county and my colleagues, if we don't make a mockery of the extensions to be doing this for 11 years, essentially, and at a time when the likelihood of your market improving is not good. Can you help me feel a reason why we should continue to extend this project rather than go back to the drawing board at this point?
That's a great question, absolutely. So when we first, it hasn't been 11 years and it is a little complicated because of the situation it is. We initially it was economic. It wasn't, I don't believe it ever was that it took a second seat to another project that we're working on. We committed, I guess several years ago, to work through the process. What complicates it is that if we could build it without any oversight from the Holiday Inn or the IHG, we would not, that adds an enormous obstacle, because we have to have everything approved. In order to have the flag of Holiday Inn Express, we have to get their approval. And it's due the license agreement is only good for 10 years. So when we decided to move forward with the process several years ago, again, we had to go through a relicensing, which mandates a renovation and also mandates them to oversee the plant. If we were building it for ourselves like any other building, that we are the oversight, we pretty much could build what we want. In this particular case, the extension that we had last time, and I felt pretty confident we would be at permitting. The reason that we're asking for this extension now, and we do expect at this point to move forward with it regardless. I mean, it's my hope and my thought that what's going on now is hopefully overblown, and that it will pass, but who knows?
But in 8 months?
No. I mean, what's going on in the world with the virus.
So that's
Yeah.
what I mean, too.
Yeah, I don't know. But what we need to do is we've got the plan, and I brought them in case anybody wanted to see them, so that you didn't think it was lip service for me not working on them. So now we've gotten through the IHG approval process. We've got the plans approved by them. So the other complication of the site is because it's a fill site, it has to be put on pilings. We submitted the plans in February to the county through planning and zoning for comment, because it's not easy to modify the building should we be required to based on a comment once the pilings are in the ground. We would have to drive more piling. So should there be any, which we have not received comments back from the county yet, from MDIA or the fire marshal, but should they request something from us from a design standpoint that would alter the footprint of the building even slightly, we would have to go back and redesign our structure. So right now, we have it all ready to go, with the exception of we're waiting for the comments to come back from the county. Once we review those comments preliminarily, we can make any adjustments to the plans we need, and then we could turn around and resubmit, modify the plans and resubmit those to the county for permit, pay our fees. We've already paid our sewer and water fee. We've already posted our bonds. So we're not so much asking for an extension because we don't want to do it. It's been a very complicated process up till now. So we're not intended to make a mockery of the planning commission at all. I mean, that's certainly not what.
I mean, it says here October 14th, 2010 was the first extension that was granted. That's 10 years.
That was
And-
on the conditional approval, and there were several extensions on that, and then in, I think, 2015 or 16, they posted the bonds, paid the fees. So all of that paperwork, was implemented, and as we indicated, we have been issued the grading permit, and he is in the process of applying for the building permit. So there has been ongoing work. If the planning commission denied the extension, we would just have to go back through a site plan review process, which would kind of waste a lot of staff time, and they're already busy, as you can see from all the projects. So nothing in the code has changed since the original approval that would not allow this building addition to be constructed. So that's all I
Let
can
me
say.
just, wasn't the original plans for the expansion of a conference room and not additional sleeping rooms?
No,
It's always been room.
it's always been rooms.
Beg your pardon?
It's always been an
It's always
addition for
been-
additional room.
Okay, I
Yes.
didn't recall.
So, but like I said, the denial of this extension would just have us go back through a whole process, which would take up a lot of staff time that I don't think is warranted, because it wouldn't really change the project before you.
To Ms. Tolliver's point, though, you've been asking for one-year extensions, and with things that are out of your control, you seem to be getting more of those out-of-control things under your control, if I'm understanding Mr. Donato correctly with his franchise agreements. Is that 8-month give you confidence even should things that are outside of your control? I mean, why 8 months? Why not another year?
Because that would give us the start of construction in the fall when they want to to start construction. That's all that was.
You don't
based
foresee
on.
that extra 4 months to ask for a year extension? I'm curious, I mean, I'm trying to relay some fears that I'm perceiving at the other end of the table. If all of a sudden, heaven forbid, the county office building closes down per some policy that we can't foresee, does that handcuff you and you'll be back in here at 7.5 months asking for another extension?
I don't know. I mean, the direction I got was to ask for 8 months because they felt that they would be under construction by that time period, so.
You know, we view it as, I know we have an approved site plan. We've paid for our sewer and water. It's completely paid for. The only thing that we have left to do is pay the county for when we apply for the permits, to pay the impact fee and the permit fee, which we have received those amounts. However, I can't pay those in advance to the county without a permit. So I just, with the drawings, you know, we were hoping not even to be here to ask for another extension. What we're looking at is, at what point does the project become, it's approved, it's paid for, nothing has changed with the, we've spent a lot, and again, it's just part of the business. We spent a lot of time and money getting to this point. We have a set of plans. It's into the county. I think the 12th, February 12th is, I think, when we submitted it. So it's been a month. We don't have comments, but we can't control that. But we paid for everything. So the only thing I haven't done is go out there and put a shovel in the ground. So if I pull my permit, if we get the comments back, which let's assume we get them back in March, if we don't, and everything's good, and it takes us another month to solidify the plans, then I apply for a permit. I've would have paid the impact fee, which is not refundable, paid the sewer and water fee, which is pretty much I've done everything. The only thing I haven't done is put a shovel in the ground. So really, the 8 months is, I think, from the way I understand it's written, we have to have substantial start. But, I mean, I think, I would assume that me paying all the money to the county that's not refundable is a substantial investment from my part to do that. So my thought is that once we get it approved, then we will go out there and drive pilings in the ground. We have to start in the fall because it's only prudent. Yes, you're right, the industry's taking a hit right now, all over, but the slow time is the fall. So it's prudent for us to start, and that's where the 8 months came, because was it March, April, May, June? So we were thinking like October, November is when we would start driving pilings, because that's a little bit, it shakes the building, it's a little bit invasive. I guess the question we ask is, at what point in time is it substantially started? If it's that, then that's what's going to happen. That's where the 8 months came from. At this point in time, the only holdup that we would see that's out of our control would be if the county did not issue the permit, because the architect is going to finish the drawings, and then it's contract work, unless there's some labor shortage, or we do have something happen, which I think would be unfounded, but that would be out of our control. If something, whether the virus spreads or something happens, or that's way out of our control, I don't know. We're not planning our business on that happening. If that does happen, I guess we could probably come back and say, hey guys, we wanted to start, but in light of what's happening in the world, we can't. But I think that would not be
Well, with
reasonable.
all the uncertainty you got going on right now with the virus and what could be happen, situations out of your control. I mean, it's just like the travel ban and things that could happen even in the state of Maryland or wherever. We could be in isolation, quarantine. I mean, things we just don't know from day to day what's going to happen. What would prohibit us from going what Tom said and giving a year's extension? Anything? Nothing? Well, I'd like to make a motion that we extend this for a year.
Could we have a point of discussion on that?
Absolutely.
Several months ago, we had a project before us that's now under construction in the Nesbitt Road area for housing, moderately priced housing. And I recall your concern, Mr. Priest, about the length of time, which was less than this, that project had been lingering because they had water and sewer allocations, and you were concerned that those weren't free for other people to use. And I remember that when you made when we made the extension approval for that project, you inserted language that required them to actually perform within that extension time or have the project be removed and have to start over.
And they did, and it's almost constructed, I mean, it's almost completed, really.
They finished in that time. I'm wondering, though,
Yeah.
if that standard that you wanted for that project should be applied at some point to this project, because it's been so long that it has been, so there's been such a high number of extension requests. I'm not saying they're not legitimate. I'm not saying that you're not coming in goodwill. I'm just saying that planning, is kind of a farce if you plan for something and then for 10 years you don't, execute something that you've approved in earlier stages. And I'm just wondering at what point.
Well, I think that project, Ms. Tolliver, was longer than 10 years. I don't remember, but seemed like to me it was like 15 years, 18 years. I'm talking, not this project, I'm talking about the one she was referring to.
I don't think it was that long, but I think the difference there was they were holding a certain amount of allocation, whereas Jim's paid for his in its entirety.
Okay.
So I think that there's a little difference in
Remember-
those two projects. They had a conditional approval where they were holding a certain amount of allocation in reserve, or the
Right.
county was, and I think that was part of it. This, they've actually paid for the sewer and the water, so.
Well, and if I could say one other thing too, and this is a commercial property, which is going to pay a lot of tax revenue to the county. There's additionally, there's a room tax that gets paid to the county. So I think it has a high benefit from a tourism perspective, generating revenue to the restaurants at the Narrows, and that's really where, Jody's still here. I mean, I know he's on the Kent Narrows board, and the Beacon studies was done, and that's where the growth at the Kent Narrows is what generates most of the tax dollars for the county. I mean, we do want to, probably if I could go back, yeah, we probably started the project a little too soon. I think, and we just happened to catch the downturn, which was not insignificant, and so that lasted, 6 or 7 years. So I think a good majority, had that happened, had we not have got the project approved right before we probably would not have gone through with it at all, and probably would have started up, once really at the time we rekindled the project is probably when we would have started it. So I think a large, however, it's our intent to build the project and because there's a need, and which will generate a substantial amount of tax dollars for the county. I mean, so we're really, I think what's evidenced by our performance is we've paid. We're not asking the county to forego any money or, we're just
understand
talking
that.
about time here. And I think that, I would apologize that it has taken so long, but this is obscure for us because we don't typically answer to really anybody but ourselves. I mean, other than the planning commission, we don't.
Well, there's always God.
When we design something, we usually say, what do you think? Yeah, it looks good, build it. And we just can't do that. We have to ask a plethora of individuals who've never built anything ever what their opinion is of it. And sort through their comments, which are.
Mind you, you're on your record, Mr. DiDonato.
No Holiday Inn members here, is it?
Right.
But no, if they're all on board, they wanted to. Why? They wanted to because it's revenue for them. I mean,
I think there's a motion.
I'll
There's a
second
motion
I'll
on the
second
floor.
the motion.
Okay.
I'll second the motion, and then after this, I'd like to make a comment.
All right, there's been a motion, there's a second. Is there further discussion?
The motion is for a year.
Is this for the year of the 8 months?
The motion was for a year.
Motion was for 1 year. Motion and second. So all in favor of a 1-year extension to Kent Narrows Hospitality, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? DiDonato, you have a 1-year extension.
yeah.
Ms. Tolliver,
I would like to request that the issue of the commission's policy on extensions be revisited as an item in the comprehensive planning process when we look at our own policies with respect to extensions, and that we discuss more fully, not only in the context of this project, you just happen to be seated at the table today.
Absolutely.
But we've had many projects come before us that have been extended for many years and for various reasons. And I think we need to look at the period of time and and the kinds of reasons for which we should consider extending projects in a context that is not particular to a specific project, but to the principles generally. I mean, there is a reason that there is a time limit on plans, approvals, and things, and I think we need to look more fully at what that was and why, and under what specific conditions we should consider.
Just to be clear, that's really not a component of the comprehensive plan, but that's something that's a policies and procedures manual issue that you have, that we can distribute to you and let you review it and make any recommended changes, but that's not a comp plan item.
Well, it's the only time we generally have to.
I
don't think I've been provided at least with a copy of the policies and procedures,
Right.
and I don't think they're online, so maybe it would be helpful if we had them so we
Sure.
knew.
Every case is different. Every situation is different. Extenuating circumstances crop up. And I think these all have to be evaluated and before we act on it. That's the way I would look at it.
But on each case, we do have the opportunity to deny it, so.
Well, I mean, I understand both sides. My guess is that there is a expectation in the development community that deadlines don't mean deadlines because they'll always get extended. So maybe we need to tighten things up a little bit.
I think we've expressed that concern several times, and I think hopefully we're getting the message across that
I hope so.
it's
Well,
not automatic.
Maybe we just need to have some standards that we consider when we consider the extension, and to see whether or not we're meeting our own standards.
For nothing else, consistency and transparency and expectations.
Yes.
Right. Or as Sharon says, give them a longer period of time up front and then not extend it. Something,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Miscellaneous staff items.
So I have a comprehensive plan update for you, and as I'm sure you are aware, the county has dissolved its contract with Smith Planning and Design, and we are now working with the consultant who was the second choice rated by the selection committee to negotiate a potential contract to take over the comprehensive plan update. I have nothing to report about that negotiation. The firm in question is right now reevaluating their submittal, and we expect to have that proposal soon, and I'm hopeful to have that consultant before you in April.
Any other staff updates, questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, hearing none?
Wait, before
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
adjourn.
Excuse me.
I wanted to comment on the letter from Lane Engineering
Yes.
about Four Seasons. First of all, I wanted to thank the staff of Planning and Zoning, or Public Works, Lee Edgar, and also the Lane Engineering staff who did provide the modeling that we requested as a pre-approval request on this project. We didn't get the pre-approval request for this analysis because there was some question as to whether or not it could be done, and I'm pleased to see that it could be done, and it was done. I did note, however, that the result of this was that 3/4 of the storm water treatment facilities would fail under the projections ultimately. Four of the 8 would hold the water under the most severe scenario, and 8 would not.
The most severe scenario, which was the sky was falling, 2,100-year sea level rise and storm surge.
Yeah.
Right.
And the analysis talks about how the stormwater facilities could be restored in the case that they fail. But it doesn't talk about what happens to the the homes there, the health welfare of the people, when they do fail, and when the 8 fail, what happens to the water obviously is going to be just surging above ground, and what's reasonable to expect would be the result of that?
I can only tell you what was told to us at the hearing in front of the Board of Appeals when this was discussed a couple of weeks ago.
Well, let's back up. We probably should have mentioned the Board of Appeals at the beginning on updates. We forgot about that.
Go ahead, you tell them.
The Board of Appeals heard the appeal from the last Four Seasons approval of Phase 2, I guess.
Phase 2.
The only a topic that was the subject of the appeal turned out to be the Planning Commission's alleged failure to consider the effect of sea level rise on the Phase 2 portion of Four Seasons, with the allegation being that the Planning Commission therefore had failed to consider health, safety, and welfare appropriately, and that should be reviewed and overturned by the Board of Appeals. And so Mike and I had prepared to discuss more generally stormwater management issues, which is what we thought was the basis of the appeal, and we had the engineers from Department of Public Works ready to testify, and they did in fact give the Board of Appeals an overview of how stormwater management works, environmental site design, and we learned a lot of acronyms, ESD to MEP, which we'd explained to the Board of Appeals. They were grateful for that. And then we learned that wasn't really what the appeal was about at all. It was about sea level rise. The Board of Appeals ultimately affirmed the Planning Commission's approval of the subdivision and site plan for Phase 2, finding that, well, we haven't seen the written opinion yet, but basically that the Planning Commission's decision was appropriate. So we should have probably brought that to you.
So as part of that testimony, that hearing that happened a couple of weeks ago, under the worst-case scenario, which is the year 2100 sea level rise, elevation, and high tide, and storm surge, it's like everything, for the 8 detention areas would
Or the
fit,
12.
for the 12 would fail. However, they did testify that none of the
They didn't say they would fail. They said that they would
be inundated. Inundated, and then once the water receded, they would go in and replant. But I was trying to get to the point. One was none of the home sites would be impacted under that worst-case scenario. They were all
They're not.
high enough that they would not be inundated. That's what their testimony was, based on
Yeah,
their
it's not in the letter.
analysis.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not in
That's
the
what they
letter.
testified to. They were, certainly for the 12 would be inundated, but none of the building lots, home lots, would be inundated.
Stormwater facilities only.
Stormwater facilities only, correct.
And the expert for Queen Anne Conservation, I admit to, I didn't listen to all of it. I left halfway through. I think Mike listened to all of it. He had a different point of view, but it mostly had to do with tailwinds, or not tailpipe something or other.
It has something to do with the piping, but anyway.
Hard to follow, I'll say that. So,
Okay, well, thank you.
Where was I? Miscellaneous staff items, Mr. Oliver. Public comments. Any public comments to close the meeting today? Yes, ma'am, please come forward.
And I signed up on the sign-in sheet earlier. I guess it didn't come in. Does it matter where I sit?
There's not.
Okay, thank you.
Introduce yourself if you would, please.
Yes, I will. I'm Barbara Obert, Stevensville. As you know, many of you know, I filed a Public Information Act request for contracts, payments, communications surrounding the abrupt suspension of the comp plan process, departure of the consultant Smith Planning. The delays and added costs to the taxpayer are a concern, and even more so the opportunity for relevant citizen input in the new process and whatever time frame may come out. This planning commission here and your two missing folks, Chairman Rice and Sharon Dobson, you were designated as the one and only committee for the comp plan process, as opposed to a very integrated process last time that had 12 subcommittees. There was a public process taking place for this new plan. The consultant was experienced in Queen Anne County, does other projects, experienced in surrounding counties, was well regarded, and was working well with our staff. They presented before this commission at the last meeting and on camera received relevant input that they were going to go and take back and use to make adjustments. But after that meeting, the abrupt halt to the process and the release stating that due to no fault of the planning staff specifically, or Smith, raises questions regarding the other parties in this process and what happened behind closed doors and once the cameras were off to drive them from their contract and being part of the process. Was it either of the other two parties to the process? The Planning Commission and associated Planning Commission staff, or was it the Board of Commissioners? Jim Moran is the liaison, or other commissioners. What happened behind closed doors, and that's why I filed an MPIA request for all the information leading to this, because it's important and it has impact to us in the county. So far, I haven't received what I requested 9 days ago. I'm hoping that will happen. I was told that the information's being got together. But we need to get to the root of the Planning Commission's role in this departure. You know, it was stated repeatedly at the last meeting that you are partners for the customer, and the customer is the constituent. I am the constituent. I am one of many constituents. And I can state personally that in relation to another process sometime previously related to the Planning Commission, I faced both derision and threats from folks who are currently still associated in this process. So that is related to a planning and zoning issue which flew directly in the face of the requirements of the comprehensive plan when I raised concerns about it. So that's all the more reason to get at what is behind this abrupt departure and turmoil. I hope that when the new group is selected, that some of your comments last time to the process will be incorporated. They were relevant, but I hope that the information that's provided on what happened behind the scenes for this abrupt turmoil will be of value to the process moving forward. You know, what or who has obstructed the process in this last month or so. This is too important. And I hope that the commission will be cooperating. It's been 9 days since my request. I can only assume that you will be cooperating with my MPIA request and what I requested, including Chairman Rice, who is not here, and Sharon Dobson, who are not here today, but they're included as part of that request. Thank you.
Ms. Ober, thank you for your comments. And I don't know, Counselor, I think typically PIA requests, they grant 30 days or something. So please don't take the 9 days as a delay or a stall. It does take time to obviously.
You know what, I've probably put in 3 or 4 MPIA requests over time, once every 2 years, maybe, over something that's very important. From only one did I receive the requested information. The other ones, I never received the requested information. And one of the guidelines from the state of Maryland for the MPIA process is if information is readily available. And this is something that just happened. So the documents are there, the contracts, the amount of payment that was made already for the terminated contractor, and then you're developing the new contract, obviously, so we don't know how much that adds to the cost. Those documents are readily available because it just happened. Maryland suggests that doing so within a shorter period of time is appropriate, within 7 days or less is appropriate if the documents are readily available. So I was going on those suggested guidelines. And so I can only assume based on, the historic track record, that there are other things at play. I hope not. But.
Did you ask for specific records, or are you of a mind to believe that there are some specific records that might shed light on the decision?
I asked for, everything related to the contract and payments associated with Smith Design and Planning, and all documents related from February 13th onward related to in which Ginny Smith Design and Planning were discussed between, among, and with Planning Commission, Board of Commissioners, and county staff, anybody associated to that. So it was specifically anytime there was a discussion taking place from that period forward. So that's the recency I mentioned.
Okay.
Well,
Hope
let's
that's
be
helpful.
clear. She will get the documents that are responsive to a request. That's not what a request says, what she just said. But we will get all responsive documents.
It's not what a request says.
The way you just characterized your request is not the language of the request.
I can pull up the language of the request and read it. Why don't you read us the language of the request? I was just trying to to answer her question quickly.
County will respond to your request.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. And you do have the opportunity to read the language in answer to her question, rather than have me try to paraphrase. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Anything from the commission? Hearing none, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are hereby adjourned. Thank you.